So my journey began about 25 years ago when I went into business as a potter to support myself and my son. I developed a series of butter dishes with the help of my friend and artist Evelyn Kinney, who made our chalice years ago. And the quality of this chalice I just love. Evelyn is just such a human person, and I think it comes through in that chalice. Humor is so important to both of us. I can just see it. Our 8th Unitarian principle, laugh whenever possible. So these dishes, and here we have the cow and the person, and each person was different based on how it was formed. And I would put various music on, depending on the feeling. Really, what I was really after was something kind of sublime, like the Mona Lisa. So people would buy them, it would make them happy. And so I played the Anonymous Four a lot, if you know them. It's just beautiful, sublime music. So these dishes were popular for a time, and orders just kept coming in. Out of the blue, a woman called one day asking if I was the one who made the chicken butter dishes. Now, I did make cows and moose and toucans and people and about 8 other ones, but no chickens. Of course, being in business and a capitalist, I didn't want to miss out on a sale. So I asked her what the chickens looked like. She perfectly described my toucan. How many chickens would you like? Sculpting under the influence of humor. So I loved hiking in our Utah Red Rock Canyon country and thought, how can I ever integrate this into my own art? Nature has just made it the best it could possibly be. What could I do with it? And the Native American rock art imagery that I found was my entry. And I drew the petroglyphs when I found them and later brushed them as images on my pottery. And this is a bighorn sheep, which is found all over the Southwest, just again and again and again. And you can see the colors kind of reflect the environment, the rough, the smooth, the oranges. And I did get my ideas for colors to use by looking carefully at the canyon walls and boulders. And in the studio, I used many of the minerals that were the same that made the colors in nature. When my accountant allowed me to write off my water filter as a business expense, I felt like I was living and working as I should be. My life was all together. Nature seems not to make mistakes. What is there is as it should be. You'll notice on what I called, my shaman platter, the green color, which is on our chalices and on this bowl up here. So this is an image, and of course I played around with the colors, but just trying to make that shaman kind of float in space. I hiked one day up to the Bristlecone Pines in Great Basin National Park. How many of you have been up there? Yeah. And it was right just as it began to rain, and the large gray tree trunks started to glow and change color before my eyes as they became kind of like an orange. Sculpting under the influence of nature. So this is my own design of the lizards, and I think I went down to the zoo in Salt Lake and drew them. But once again, it's just a kind of a rich rendition of color and texture that you find in the canyon country. It did not sit completely well with me capitalizing on the beautiful 1,000-year-old imagery of deceased Native Americans who lived in these canyons. I began paying attention to crows and ravens and the way they moved on the ground in order to develop my own imagery. And here is Skip. Skip was a wild raven, brought back to health when he was a little guy by a gentleman who lived in a forest clearing near my hometown in Oregon. Every afternoon, about 4 p.m., this guy would call up into the sky. He'd call Skip's name. And in a few minutes, Skip usually appeared just way high up as a speck. As I watched, he swooped down, barrel rolling twice, and eventually landed on the branch of a nearby tree, then onto the back of a lawn chair, and then to his plate of meat on the porch, where I lay on my belly to photograph him. Wild and trusting. I asked why he thought ravens roll over in the sky, and was told that he was just having fun. So here's Skip on a platter. And of course, the lawn chairs don't go with, the wilds of southern Utah, so some kind of abstract rock form. So with the crow, I was trying to just give a sense of just the wildness of it. I mean, it's just beyond all to me. So, sculpting under the influence of other species. When I looked into the raven's eyes, I could detect no perception on its part that I existed. I'd been drawing the human figure weekly for years, and it was time to incorporate people into my work. I've found that our humanity is expressed in the uniqueness of each one of us. About this time, I joined UUCO, where I met my future husband, Peter. Raise your hand, Pete. And I began coming to church frequently, knowing he would be there. Some aspects of the principles that we stand for are reinforced in my mind and heart each time I come here and interact with you. Without you, our church community, and this beautiful influence on who we are as people would not exist. I am forever thankful to each of you in whatever way you help our community to be. This is a recent piece. And these are sculptures in relief. They are on the wall and stick out maybe 8 inches or so. And this is one of my favorite models, Ashley. So, sculpting under the influence of love. Three years ago, Eugene Dahl, the sculptor of monuments, including the huge pioneers in Utah's Capitol Rotunda, called to invite me to send images for a small sidebar for a magazine. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what the magazine was, and I think he must have found me by Googling relief sculpture. There aren't a whole lot of us, I think, in the world who do it. Anyway, he invited me to send images for a small sidebar. I enthusiastically sent them what they asked for, plus an image of this sculpture, Alec, my son, mainly because I thought that the 2 photos I sent were the best I had. And I know that magazines like good imagery. The artwork appeared on the cover of Sculpture Review, the magazine of the National Sculpture Society. Then it won the Proskauer Prize at their annual competition for non-traditional sculpture. And it was purchased by an art collector in Seattle for his corporate headquarters. He was collecting one ceramic portrait from each country in the world. I thought to myself, so this is what success as a fine artist is like. That viewpoint changed soon enough when an opportunity developed at Lantern House, our local homeless shelter. This works really well. So as you can see underneath, it's our first principle. And that's principle, really, I've got to say, now that I'm starting to work with people, it is really almost a guiding light for what I'm trying to do. So this is a sculpture of a homeless man who was in the park downtown, and he allowed me for a few dollars to photograph him for a portrait. In my naivety, I thought it was perfect for the new homeless shelter and convinced them to hang it in the cafeteria where it would be seen by everyone, who came to eat their lunch out the cold, etc. However, people there didn't like it. In fact, they hated it because it reminded them of being down and out themselves. I saw kind of the quiet dignity in the gentleman. So, this, I took it down, but it motivated me to create something that people would enjoy, that would lift their spirits as they ate their meals. The shelter graciously dedicated a large wall space for a new sculpture. I've since found out, if this happens to you, make sure you get it in writing. People change their minds and then you're kind of stuck. But anyway, it all worked out. So, I listened over lunch to the ideas of the people who ate there. It's a fascinating place to go have lunch. The lunch isn't so great, but the conversations can be very interesting. So I listened to their ideas about what they wanted to see that would encourage them. The social worker there arranged a time when I could photograph the mother and daughter holding hands at the bottom. So these were homeless people that posed for the photograph, and they paid them, for their services for posing. The construction worker is wearing some of the McCain family, the hat and the tool belt, etc. So the mother holding her daughter's hand is thinking about having a home of her own, and the daughter her own cat. And so you can see from the thought balloons what's happening. The mother and the daughter lived at the shelter until she got a job and her own apartment. Sounds a little bit like Family Promise. This artwork has been the most personally fulfilling I've made. I was able to apply my skills to express the perspectives of people who needed a lift. Sculpting under the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Artists want to create work that's meaningful. That desire of mine has grown here at UUCO by participating in study groups on recommended books like The Third Reconstruction by William Barber, Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, by helping out with Family Promise, and occasionally attending an NAACP meeting or Black Lives Matter meeting, and socializing with you during coffee house. I see this, our church, our community, as kind of a haven for being able to do what we might not otherwise be able to do. Now I'm attempting to gain access to other walls in public buildings in Ogden, where people from all walks of life frequently pass by. I'd like to create more sculptured assemblages there that beautifully depict diverse people larger than life of all colors. 38% of our population are beige, or are not beige, like most of us here. Seeing sculpture of people like them will help them feel welcome and let them know that they count. For instance, in our municipal building, many people come to pay their bills. I can imagine a row of 4 or 5 people of all colors leaning on their forearms on the railing above the hallway, looking down with pleased expressions, welcoming people who look like them. I've heard citizens of our town, some are afraid to come into some of our public buildings. They don't trust the government. Most of us here don't think a thing of it. It's taken all these years for me to understand that I have benefited economically from racism in all its forms. Yet spiritually, it has not been positive for anyone. How can I not try to make a difference? Ogden Civility Commission really likes this idea, as well as the Art Council, but we'll see. Buildings are kind of hard to find. So we're coming full circle. On the left, we have that toucan butter dish. And on the right, the calico cat. I ask you, does that toucan look like a chicken? All right.
We're with you.